Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Business and Wealth Australia podcast. And I'm here today with Deborah, Beck, Mewing from the Property Frontline. Welcome, Deborah.
Hi, everyone, and hello, Alicia. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Deb. So today, the topic is very juicy because the Australian property market is heating up. It's very juicy. So today, we'd love to talk about how a buyer's agent vets a deal, what are the processes that you go through so that the listeners can get an idea and perhaps have some great takeaways from it. So I'm very excited to have this chat with you today.
Sounds good. Let's get into it.
So, Deb, tell us a bit about what you do and how you help clients.
Okay, so my business, the Property Frontline, we're a little bit unusual in that we can help buyers build a portfolio by buying property anywhere in Australia for any type of budget. So that means we can buy homes, investments, or commercial properties. And we can buy properties for, say, 300,000 or 400,000 up to 10 million and over. And what we're really known for is building smart portfolios where people can develop continuous income, buying as few properties as possible, because you don't need 100 properties. You might only need 2 or 3. And if you buy the right ones, they can set you up for life.
That's fantastic. And you've been in business for a few years. So, tell us how that sort of shaped your career over time.
Yeah, so I started out, I was working in global corporate, so for big law firms and accounting firms, and I was building my own portfolio as kind of a side hustle. And then I tried to expand my portfolio by using some buyer's agents and found that I couldn't get the service I needed. So just flipped and set up my own business, and like right from the day we started, just took off and has been going very, very well since then. And I think it really comes down to the fact that we have very tailored ways of identifying property and making sure it really matches exactly what our clients want and need.
That's incredible. That's fantastic to hear. And, you've got some tenure under your belt, and that gives you great credibility when you're talking about such an important investment or, for someone to buy their own home as well. So that's really good to hear. So let's get into the juicy bits. So we'd love to know how you start off with vetting a property. What are some of the steps that you take when you are looking for that hidden gem, for that property that is going to deliver some capital growth or help the investors grow their wealth, essentially?
Yeah. So the most important thing that we do is start with the buyer. So if you look at even a budget of, say, 500,000, there's such a variety of property that you can buy. And we'll often hear people say, oh, it's all about location, or you shouldn't have emotion in the property that you buy. And if it's an investment, it shouldn't have emotion. But that is actually not true. Who is going to spend $500,000 on something that they don't like? You shouldn't do that. What we do is help our clients understand what type of property would really work for them. And then we bring the numbers into it and all of the other data points that are required to make a really, really good investment. And I think that's why people keep coming back to us, because we buy property that suits a particular need. Largely, it's property that will people will keep in their portfolios and not want to sell. But once we've got that started, then we work out from there. So um, when we're looking at investment properties, the key difference is that we start looking at an area. We're not limited just a suburb. So if you're looking for a home, you'll normally be focused on the suburb or just a couple of blocks. You want to be near a couple of key points. But with getting a really good investment property, you want to choose an area that has all of that goodness of, number one, lots of good demographics from a lot of families in an area, and ideally lots of babies being born in an area, because that's going to give you lots of longevity in your capital growth. We always look for really good infrastructure. So future developers or the major developers and the government, they have to choose their area and their projects on like a 10-year planning cycle. So they know where capital growth is heading or where demand is heading. And so we can piggytail on the back of that. If the government's spending money, you know that it's a pretty good area. And then we start looking for that essence of a property that has lots of opportunity coming to it. So if it's a unit, we might try and get a unit that is an older style where it might be rezoned and where you can turn one unit into 3 or 4, or a house where could be rezoned or where you could add a granny flat, something like that.
That's incredible. I do have a couple of follow-up questions. So, for example, if a buyer comes to you and they sort of go, oh, look, I'm so new to this property journey. I have no idea what I want, what I like, or what is going to be a good investment. Are you able to support them in helping their brief or helping them understand what may be good for them or what may be a good idea or what to stay away from?
Oh, definitely. That's exactly the essence of what we do. So I have a qualification from the property investment professional. So I'm a certified QPIA. So that gives me a unique qualification to be able to do analysis from not only like a capital growth perspective, but from that financial perspective. And so that's what we do with our clients when we're deciding what property will work for them. So we work out a strategy, and I will, in our initial meeting, walk them through what's happening across Australia, looking for the areas that are going to have the most growth. And I can cover off that briefly now if you like, because it's, on record clearly the areas that I absolutely rate and the areas that I do not. But when it comes down to the individual, even though I would say, oh, let's not go to Tasmania because it's an island and I do not see fast capital growth coming there. If you're an investor and you want to buy an apple farm, well, we'll go to Tasmania for you. See what I mean? So it's about like, what does the individual need and want? And then we find the absolute best place for them.
Yeah, that makes like absolute sense. And that I think it's so important to understand what somebody wants before you go ahead and search for them. Um,
Well, you'd be the same, wouldn't you, with advising your clients? It comes down
yes,
to
definitely. So when you want to
what they need.
what they need and what they're looking at doing, I guess what the 5-year plan is, what the 10-year plan is, with their business structure or like if they're setting up a property, then yeah, 100%. You have to talk about what they want to do and then work backwards from there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once we've identified a property, so we looked at an area and then we will shortlist the best matches for our client for a particular area. And then we do a whole lot of technical work to actually make sure that the property is going to deliver the way we have assessed it to deliver. So, for example, if we say, oh, if you buy here, you'll be able to put a granny flat in or you'll be able to build a duplex. Well, then it needs to meet council requirements and it needs to be a certain shape. We need to check the pipe works, a lot of things like that. For every property we buy, we also speak to council because the council legislation is changing all the time. So once we've got through all of that technical side of things, then it comes down to the deal. So as part of our shortlisting, we would have found things within our client's budget. We would have assessed the expected valuation. So what's the property worth? We would have assessed the rental amount and whether there was any works that might need to be done to make that property more valuable or be able to get better rent. Uh, and then, so for all of that works, then it comes down to personal or the people involved again. So we start with the buyer, but when we're getting down to the deal, it comes down to what is the agent like, what's their experience, and what are their key drivers, and also what does the seller need. So does the seller are they they desperate to sell? So I need to be picking up all of that as I'm assessing the property, because then it will determine what I'll go in with in my negotiation, whether I'll go under what the guide price is and work from there. And I also, while we're collecting information on a property, I'll be collecting all that sort of little pieces of information along the way as well. So if I hear that the vendor is really attached to, and this has happened to me, they're attached to a dishwashing machine. It's actually happened once. The dishwashing machine was listed as part of the sale, so it would stay with the property. But through some of our research, we found that they actually really wanted to take that dishwasher. So I tried to find things that would leverage the deal a little bit better by bringing in that personal element. And often you'll never know what it will be. It'll be different for every property. And also, the agent. So if the agent, if it's like the end of the year and you know that they want to wrap up a deal, or they've got to meet a quota for a month, or they're not, they're very new to the game. And so I can use a few extra pressure points. So it comes down to that negotiation. And of course, you're deciding the whole way through. If the deal doesn't work out when it gets to that part, you have to be ready to keep moving until you do lock in a deal. And just one more point on that. We also have the leverage points of the building and pest inspection. So we can see certain things when we go and visit a property, view a property, but it might not be until after we'd agreed on a price that we'll do a building and pest inspection, and we might find something that might kill a deal, or we might negotiate for that to be fixed before we purchase. So I think I've bent your ear too much on that part, but that's getting down to the really nitty gritty of that final piece of getting a really good property.
That's incredible. And that whole point made me realize that at the end of the day, you're really dealing with people. Everything is about, like when you're negotiating with the agent who is a person and they are doing the job. But at the same time, they still have their personal pressures. And then the vendor has their own personal pressures. So That's incredible and valuable information, to have and to be able to utilize. Moving on to
Yeah.
the area part, let's deep dive into that a bit more. And I'm sure the listeners would also love to understand what are some of the things that you consider a really high priority when selecting an area when you start searching your for a property? Because I think a lot of the time what people do is they go on realestate.com or go on Domain and then put in the price bracket and say, okay, this is the area that I can buy in. So I'm going to like start looking here. So I feel like you'll have much better methodologies of selecting the right area.
So what we will normally do is really be starting from where is population growing. So where is the demand? And we're looking at the numerical performance, so sales performance at a high level, and then work our way down to the property level. And so key tips. So what areas are in demand from a local government level? And you'll be able to tell that by what infrastructure is being introduced into an area. We typically hug infrastructure, so stay as close as you can to good transport, good hospitals, and some extra feature that it makes that place special. Another tip from a price point is looking at where your budget sort of like the budget area that would match your criteria, and then spreading a circle out from that, because typically if you move just one little ring out, so maybe like 5Ks out of where you think might be great, make sure that you're looking a little bit broadly so that you can pick up a bargain if that's your, that's one of your drivers. Yeah, and so we, we're looking at longer term changes to a particular area. So things like, well, in New South Wales, the new airport, looking at that piece of infrastructure and the changes that would impact on the local area. And you can see, what properties are coming up and what changes are occurring. Depending on taste, we would normally buy existing properties, not brand new, because you can get more value that way. But, and I'm trying to be succinct here, might want to cut that. Right. So looking for infrastructure and future changes. So things like the Olympics, of course, that's happening in Brisbane. So while the Olympics itself won't be the key driver of change, the amount of money that the government is putting into infrastructure is making the change. Then we also do consider the attitudes of the government, the government of the day. That's a reason why Victoria is not a place that I would consider buying in now if I was looking for good capital growth, because that government is taxing not only investors but homeowners a lot. And so it's very hard to actually get good returns. And the price point of there's not very much capital growth going there. And the population, a lot of people are moving out of there and moving into New South Wales and Queensland. Yeah. And what are the other areas? And then, we start looking at vacancy rates. So how many properties are available to rent, and the demand. So days on market, how often is, or how long is it taking for properties to sell?
That's incredible.
It's actually a lot.
That was a lot of information, but I thought it was really, really good
Sorry.
information. Um, when you said about where people are moving or where people are growing or where families are, you've got lots of families. I immediately think of Sydney. I immediately think of Brisbane, but a lot of people in Sydney are priced out of the market. So is there any scope for regional areas, or are we just or people who are wanting to get into the market? Um yeah, I guess I'm just trying to find out if there is scope in regional areas for people wanting to get into the market.
First of all, depending on your budget, you can still buy into Sydney. Uh, if you're interested in buying units, so a unit in Penrith, you can pick them up for like 400,
Yeah,
450.
that's right.
And if it's an older block, you can be over time part of the change where that, might be like a unit block of 4. And soon that might be a unit block of 24. Um, and we see that a lot along the coast as well. But then if you have a budget, say like between 500 and a million, I would be looking at the edges of Sydney. So I would still call the Central Coast the edge
Mm-hmm.
and just move along the ripple that way. Um, and start to think about the way cities will develop. So they'll move out in like, I want to say an octopus, but it'll be like 2 to 3 hours away from a main hub. That's where like the next hub might be. And look at that and see whether that's going to fit your requirements. What are the changes? Is there a lot of jobs going into that area? Is there going to be some piece of infrastructure that's going to make it easier, like a better road or better rail to get to that area? So in New South Wales, there is a lot still opportunity for investors and for home buyers. And the government is going to be working as hard as possible to free that up. And longer term, like we have got things like that fast rail will be coming in the not too distant future. So that'll make it easier to get to different places. And then, like, so that covers off New South Wales.
Hmm.
So the main driver where capital growth is at its optimum is still Sydney, Western Sydney. And that's because of the price point and also because of like there's supposed to be 1 million babies going into Western Sydney.
Oh, wow.
Then the next, that's over like the next 5 to 8 years. Then Brisbane is the next fastest mover of capital growth, and you can, still get amazing properties for that 500 to 600 ballpark, not too far from the main centre of Brisbane. But with Brisbane, it's a bit different. They are still developing, like how big that will be. So about an hour back from the Gold Coast, all of that's developing. And then all the way to the Sunshine Coast. So that's a big area, and you can buy in, a range of price points. And then the third one is Perth. So why is Perth so great? A number of reasons, because for starters, it has just started to feed on itself. So it used to be just dependent upon the mining industry, but now they've got you can fly direct from Perth to London. So there's a lot more international people who are, buying in Perth. And of course, they've just won the big submarine base contract. So that's going to bring a lot of families, a lot of jobs, and a lot of industry to that area. And so it's got, a lot to go. Adelaide, no, because it's too small. Like, what industry is going in there? Nothing.
Hmm.
I should be so horrible about Adelaide, but it's too small. It's not really going to do anything. Victoria, great, because the government is making it too hard there. Canberra, we don't like because there's only one employer in Canberra, and that's the federal government.
Mm.
If the government decides to cut jobs, house prices. That's too much risk. And Tasmania, it's an island. Like, do I have to say more? No, not really.
And the weather.
There's a lot of people. Well, yeah, some people love that weather.
That's true,
But
actually.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's funny because
Oh,
I've lived in Adelaide for quite a while, so it's funny that you say Adelaide is a no go for you. But we're talking property
well,
investment, so
but 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 aren't you a living, breathing example of that? I mean, lovely place to grow up. That people like I spent a lot of time in Perth and Adelaide at one time in my life, and like, where am I now? I didn't stay. That's all I'm saying. Like, like people have some babies there, but then they leave.
yeah, that's a very incredible point. And then how is that? I feel like we've talked a lot about investment property, but how is that different to buying your own home or buying a house to live in?
So, if it's your own home, uh, there's two ways really to think about your home, because some people will use their home as leverage points for wealth. But really, when you're buying your own home, it's important to make sure that your personal criteria is the most important thing. So you might want to be in a particular suburb because you grew up there or you have got good connections there. Um, the other point is that you will and should have more of a personal driver into the number of bedrooms and the look and feel of that property. Um, but there's nothing wrong with that. As long as you're still making it, as long as you're still paying too much for a property. So just do good desktop valuations before you buy. Um, yeah, and I'd say the difference is, like, you really focus in on a suburb and like really like wait for the right thing to come up. Whereas with investments, you're looking at a broader area so that you can find the good stuff quicker.
I guess you've got
Does
more
that help?
options with investments, right? Versus when you buy your own home, you're attached to a specific area. And your rule of trying to buy an older property, does that still stay for home ownership?
It really comes down to the individual. So it there are like really good, relatively new properties that really work for some people. They haven't got the time or interest in renovating it or rewiring it. So, might buy something that works for you, but typically you'll get better value if you buy something that is already established. And I know we were just talking about homes, but a lot of homeowners and a lot of investors get trapped by false claims about the value of brand new or off the plan property. Yeah, so it's very rare for it to actually deliver what it was advertised to deliver. Um, and you'll pay a premium for brand new.
Mm.
So, but also, you can't buy something that has major issues that you have no
Control over.
skill or understanding to deal with. So you have to. It comes down to the individual.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a fair point. So when you're selecting a property, how do you select the best one?
well, it'll be the best one for the buyer.
Mhm.
And so it'll be their criteria plus our professional selection. So it'll be a mix of a really good match. And it comes down to, like, when I shortlist a property, make sure it's within your budget. Start with that. There's no point, and we see it all the time on TV, right? It drives me crazy. There's people crying because they're at an auction, but they don't even get to put their hand up because the property is going to sell for $1 million and they could only buy it. They only had 500,000. Like, don't do that. There's lots of good um, there's lots of good valuation sites online. Look at those. One good one is property.com.au. You can put in the address and you'll get an estimate of what the ballpark price for that property is, and be disciplined. Don't try and wish and hope that it'll be within budget. Go to look at the lower end of the valuation and aim for those properties, and then be very clear about what your criteria is. And a lot of buyers think, oh, I'll be flexible with my criteria. No. There are so many properties. There's around about 40,000 properties a month that are traded, and like they're the ones that are just sold, like not the ones that are
Sitting there
sitting
waiting.
there each month. Yeah. So stick to your criteria because you've got to save your energy. And so be tight with your criteria and only go and see those properties that, will work for you, and put your energy into those, because there's a lot of information you need to collect. So be diligent before you even get in the car. And then use some really good negotiation tools. And remember that, like, you know, agents are people, sellers are people. When it comes to us, so what criteria do we use? Number one, has to match what the buyer needs. Number two, technically it has to work. So, is it a good shape, not a weird slope? Hate battle axe blocks because what's the point of them? Anyway, unless that's what the buyer wants. And then, really good price so that there's good value coming to it, and assessing it to match the buyer's ability to keep that property. So I love property that needs a lot of work done to it, but lots of my clients don't want to even lift a hammer. And so I have to buy property that works. And for me, I will always look at the future opportunity for a property. And if I can't see that, then my clients and I would have a bit of a chat about whether, that's the right way to go. But
That
does that
that's fan-
cover off?
that's fantastic. No, that's a wealth of knowledge that you've just talked about. And to cover off the final point, the negotiation. So, give us a bit more information about that, and how do you work and negotiate the property price?
Yeah. So really, you can, you win or lose a negotiation by not assessing the property value at the start. So gather as much data as you can before you even start talking to the agent, and then ask them to help you validate what the prices are. So you can ask for a price guide. In some states, agents aren't required to give that, but they can say to you, well, I based the value of this property on these last 3 sales. So look at that. Always look at the past sales, but look at the properties that are for sale on the market at the moment, and pay particular attention to properties that have lingered on the market. And so it's really about doing good research and then opening up to the agent, being as candid without giving away the farm, uh, being as candid as you can. So when you turn up to see a property, if you like the property, tell the agent you like the property. Always have your finance in place and say to them, look, I'm still thinking about what I think this property would be worth for me,
Mm.
but I am pre-approved, so that they know to come back to you, because there's lots of buyers at the moment. And so, you have to be competitive, like you have to be a good buyer. And and then it's about if you're looking at an area that is, or a property that has lingered on the market, you can take your time, go in lower and be slow with your increases. But if it's a hot market, you will have to be competitive with your initial price. And don't muck around. Don't play games. Just be straight. Nobody's got time to waste. And the truth of it is the agents are the gatekeepers for who gets the property and who doesn't, even though price will play a factor. The agent will be in the vendor's ear and say, I think this is a good buyer, and they're going to keep going with the deal, not someone who's just kicking the tires. Um, mm,
That's so that's so important to, understand that the agent is also human and they are assessing you as well as you're walking in the door, and assessing your competency as a buyer. And I never thought of that. But that's a fantastic point that you made there. Uh,
good tip.
and to finalize everything, one last question, which is, what are some of the red flags that you say, if I see these in a property, I'm running away, or I'm telling my buyers, let's go find a better deal?
So starting off with busy roads. So it's really no point. Of course, we have very long roads, and so you can look at the quieter ends of the busy roads. Like it sometimes is hard to avoid because they will be discounted. So you'll think you're getting a bargain, you're not. It'll never go up. So we don't even go and see those sorts of properties.
What
The
about a
second
service
one
lane kind of
is
scenario with a busy road?
as long as there's not going to be future expansion of the road. So sometimes they will put in a service road, and there's a nature strip, but eventually, like, look at what's happening in Sydney with all of the roads expanding.
Mm.
So yeah, be careful of that. Might often be included in the contract that an area will be scheduled for change. So check that. But yeah, so busy roads, bad, bad, close, bad. What am I trying to say? Bad items close by. So, for example, transmission lines. While you're looking at a property online, you might not see the transmission lines, but if you use Google Maps and look at an aerial shot, you'll see them not far. Don't do it. And don't buy near them. I've seen property with a water tower behind it. I just wait another week. There'll be more property. Get another one. Then battle axe blocks are not ideal. So what I mean by that is when there's a property at the front, a little driveway, and then a property at the back.
Kind
That
of like a
property at
granny
the back, and
flat that's got its own access scenario.
no, that is a different situation. The granny flats within a boundary are fantastic.
Mm.
I'm talking about where it's a completely different house. a completely different lot. So it might be, you might see it online and it says, oh, this property has got, it's 900 square meters, but 400 of those square meters are the driveway and you'll never be able to use it. So that, you're stuck at the back properties all around you. And yeah, they're not ideal. And depending on the situation, the shape of the block it will determine the future value of that property. So if it's like a weird shape, like, like that or like that, you want a rectangle, ideally, or yeah, long rectangle. Yeah, but well, to be honest, there's lots of things that would be red flags for me. But on the red flag question, don't run away if it's an unusual thing that you might think, oh, that's got a crack in that wall. That looks suspicious. There's so much we can do to easily fix things like that these days. So just look a little bit further and speak to your building and pest inspector about whether these things are structural or not. Yeah.
That's some great insight. Thank you so much for sharing all of those insights. And it really goes to show the layers upon layers of thought goes into buying the right property, not just any property, the right property that is going to grow, that is going to, whether you'll want to jump from one owner occupier to the next as you are, getting bigger and bigger, or you're moving suburbs and getting closer and closer to like the CBD, and getting a more expensive property each time, or you are an investor who is purchasing more and more properties as you go. But it really goes to show the incredible amount of thought that goes behind buying it. And the layers of information, I kind of like, as you were talking, I was thinking about like programs that where you add a layer and then you add another layer and then you add another layer. It just increases in complexity, but effectively everything that you were talking about sounded like that in terms of the process that you undertake when purchasing a property for a buyer. And the most important thing that I've taken from this conversation is that you're always dealing with humans. So dealing with the agent who's human, you're dealing with the vendor who's human. So once you keep the human elements into it, um, it makes everything easier for everyone. So thank you so much for having a chat with us today. It's been incredible.
Thank you.
And yeah, everything that you've said has resonated so well. And if anyone you'd like to contact Deborah, please feel free to do so. I will leave the details for Property Frontline in the show notes. Thanks, Deborah.
Thanks for having me.